Hello and welcome to the first ever Hemm Productions Podcast. For those of you who know me, you know I've been trying to get this channel and production company off the ground for some time now. Well, this podcast is a big part of that dream. Lately, I've spent most of my weeks working on scripts, storyboards, music, and artwork, and these projects, while time-consuming, don't always come to fruition. But with this podcast, that no longer matters, because I can share what I've been working on without worrying whether it's finished or not. This podcast not only keeps you in the loop on what's happening behind the scenes at Hemm Productions, but serves as accountability for myself to keep myself on target for a full channel rebrand later this year. But most of all, it's an entertaining show for movie nerds like me. The Hemm Productions podcast wraps up the week of movie news, including the Australian box office, what's happening at Hemm Productions week to week, and finishes by discussing some of the movies I've seen each week, something old and something new. Through this podcast, finally I can discuss the work I'm doing each week, even if it's unfinished, as well as discuss the news that interests me and may well interest you in a concise weekly show. But most of all, it gives me an excuse to flap my gums about movies, so tell a friend, tune in, get comfy, and let's start with the news. What's good about having your own podcast is you get to decide what you want to talk about, and despite everyone talking about the Emmys, I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to talk about the Toronto Film Festival wrapping up with Hamnet winning the Festival People's Choice Awards. Now, for those who don't know, the Toronto International Film Festival is one of the biggest festivals of festival season, which is wrapping up right around now. We still have New York Film Festival coming up soon, but we've just had Telluride and Venice, and so all sorts of movies are being debuted. Toronto normally gets some of the biggest let's say mainstream movies or more mainstream. For example, the third Knives Up movie, Wake Up Dead Man, debuted. But the big one is Hamnet winning the Audience Choice Award. So the People's Choice Award is normally pretty dead on when it comes to Best Picture nominees, at least. So last year we had The Life of Chuck win the People's Choice Award, but that film wasn't officially released until this year. So I honestly think that does hurt its Oscar chances. But here we have Hamnet, directed by Chloe Zhao, the director of Oscar-winning film Nomadland, which took home this very award the year it was debuted. She also, of course, directed the Marvel film, the very good Marvel film The Eternals, which mainstream audiences might be more familiar with than the Best Picture winner of 2020. Yeah, that's right, 2020 Oscars, Nomadland. I feel like that's probably one of the least watched Best Picture winners in recent memory. Otherwise, you'd have to go for Coda just the year afterwards. Weird Oscar years. The point is, it looks like Hamnet will probably end up being nominated for Best Picture at this point. I can't wait to see it, along with the first runner-up, Frankenstein, by Guillermo del Toro, and the second runner-up, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. Now, I think I'll just fly through the rest of the categories. I'll highlight the ones I'm sort of interested in. So for the International People's Choice Award, we had No Other Choice by director Park Chan-wook, who you'll probably know as the director of Oldboy, The Handmaiden. I'm really hopeful for this movie. I really want it to make a huge splash. I think Park Chan-wook deserves an Oscar. We've got the People's Choice Documentary Award that went to The Road Between Us, The Ultimate Rescue. Cannot wait to see that. But my most anticipated movie would have to be the People's Choice Midnight Madness Award that went to Nirvana the Band, The Show, The Movie by director Matt Johnson. I've been keeping my eye on this film for so long, and Matt Johnson directed my favorite film of 2023, a little film called Blackberry. And this movie adaptation of his cult TV web series, I've heard the best things about. If you don't know anything about Nirvana the Band, The Show, The Movie, or Nirvana the Band, The Show, it has nothing to do with Kurt Cobain. I would just go look up on YouTube, Update Day, and you'll get a sense of what you're missing. And for my last news story of the day, I just wanted to talk about a little company I love called Laika. Laika you would know as the animation studio that brought you films like Coraline, Missing Link, Paranorman. They're a company known for their animation, very stunning stop-motion animation that costs hundreds of millions of dollars and takes many years to develop. And part of that reason may be why they are continuing to push into live action, with a new film being announced, directed by Lulu Wang, the director of The Farewell, a little favourite of mine back from, I believe, 2019. Lucy Liu and Charles Melton are set to star, and it's being produced by Barack Obama, of all people, on behalf of his Higher Ground company. So the film is called Audition, based off a novel from 2025. It's a twisty thriller that follows a celebrated actress enjoying a charmed bohemian life in Manhattan with her creative husband. That is until a mysterious young man appears, claiming to be her long-lost son. What begins as a misguided reunion spirals into an enthralling mystery about identity, guilt, and the roles we perform. So it's also being co-written by the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Matyana Majok. So this announcement is on top of the already announced Atmosphere, which is meant to be a sweeping romance set in space in the late 70s, early 80s, directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, the directors of Captain Marvel, who haven't made a... The last thing they directed was an Apple TV Plus show, which are 3 words that don't come out of my mouth very often, so haven't seen that. But I just thought it was quite interesting to talk about Laika for a moment. This company that I really love, that very infrequently releases these beautiful stop-motion movies. Apparently the money just isn't there, with Missing Link only making around $25 million in the box office, off of a $100 million budget, so that would certainly make you scramble a little bit. But I only bring this up to talk about Laika, which is one of the most consistent production companies in terms of animation, pretty unrivaled, especially when you compare the quality from Disney and Pixar lately. Obviously, it takes a lot longer for these beautiful live-action films to come out. I am just curious to see whether their live-action films will have any hint of that magic that Laika brings to all their movies, but to be honest, I don't think so. I do think this is just a money deal. I'm sure the films will be great, but I don't think we're going to see a particular Laika quality to them. I hope they are simply as good, if not better, than some of those movies, although that is like a big hill to climb over. I'll see myself out. And now to end with the box office. You could say this is just the blank check influence on me, but I really do enjoy looking at the box office, seeing what Australians are seeing at the movies. Always interests me, but of course, the one week I decide to sit down and make this podcast, Box Office Mojo seems to be a little bit broken, at least on the Australian weekend 37, ending September 14th. Unless we had one of the most abhorrent movie weekends in history, which I don't think we have. I'm waiting for that to update. Instead, I'll give last weekend's box office because I want something to talk about. And this is the first episode and nothing has gone wrong at all. So, number 1, new this week, The Conjuring Last Rites made about $3 million. It's made a little more on the weekend since, I'm sure. That's debuting at number 1. Number 2, we got The Roses at about 700,000. Haven't seen The Roses yet. Gonna take a trip to smell the roses, I think. Conjuring Last Rites I haven't seen because I think the last few films in that franchise are pretty dog shit. But seems like Australians are going out. One thing that really surprises me is Weapons is doing very well here. It is holding at number 3 from number 2 last week. It's made about $6.5 million so far. Love to see good original horror films making money, not just franchises. Number 4, the only movie to actually jump up by about 28% is Laika Chapter 1 Chandra, which is a big Indian superhero film that's just been released. I might actually have to check it out because it looks pretty dang cool, and looks like more people in Australia are checking it out too, as it's had that nice 28% jump. Love to see international films climbing the ranks. If you're a nerd like me, you'll know it's quite common for these Indian films to perform very well in Australia. I know in my local theatre, they pop off. It's always the biggest screening room. Saw Weapons in an empty theatre, but Laika Chapter 1 Chandra, I think I'll see in a fucking packed hall. Anyway, the rest of the list isn't that interesting. We've got Freakier Friday jumping one spot. Not gonna just go see it. I think that's a Disney Plus watch. We've got F1 the movie below that, which I think is one of the biggest movies of the year for Australia, actually. It's been in the box office for 11 weeks. That's pretty cool. The Fantastic Four, just below that. Caught Stealing, Madarashi, Fight or Flight, and all the way down to number 18, we've got Honey Don't, which is the film I went and saw this week. So now we come to the personable section of the podcast, where I talk about something old and something new and what's going on at Hemm Productions. So I went out and saw Honey Don't this week, which, as I said in the box office, has had a huge drop-off. Nobody seems to care about this film. I see terrible reviews online for it, people saying it's the Coen brothers' worst movie. Singular Coen, of course. This is Ethan Coen's new movie, following up on his last lesbian heist film, Drive Away Dolls. This film isn't a period piece, like you would think from even the opening credits. It's set in modern times. We follow Honey, a detective played by Margaret Qualley, as she investigates one of her clients who has been killed mysteriously in what's labeled an accident. You know the story. This movie I kind of enjoyed. It's even a minor Coen brothers movie is strange enough to justify seeing in theaters. The movie is a little all over the place. It's kind of like a slapped together collection of characters, scenarios, weird scenes that you'd find in any Coen brothers movie. And this is all seen through the eyes of Detective Honey, private investigator Margaret Qualley, who is the reason to see the movie. Things I like about it are also part of its problems. Like, the movie kind of just meanders. It kind of feels like a day in the life of Margaret Qualley, which is a perfect kind of movie. But there's no real depth to her character, or anyone else's character for that matter. It feels like each scene kind of just happens, barely sets up the next scene, and then that scene kind of just happens. It feels like a jumbled editing timeline. That being said, it's directed by Ethan Coen. It looks good, it's engaging, there's some brilliant action, and like I said before, of course there's some weird scenes, of course there's some characters you don't quite understand, but none of them hit the highs of any of their other films, to be quite honest. But like I said right at the top of the show, even hitting close to the level of a Coen Brothers movie is pretty good. And this movie is 90 minutes long, it has some great stars in it, it's got some decent action, and I enjoyed watching it. Will I think about it ever again? Probably not. It goes right next to Drive Away Dolls at the bottom of my Coen's list. There's one more of these lesbian thriller films starring Margaret Qualley meant to be coming out. I'll be there day one. But these are definitely a deviation into slightly more rote, boring territory. And I just wish Ethan was making way more interesting movies with his newfound freedom from his brother, if that's what they're calling it. If you're a diehard Coens fan, I'd still say go see it. I don't think it's as terrible as the reviews tend to be saying. I think it is perfectly serviceable and has enough interesting that it makes worth seeing in a theater. And look, 90 minutes, fucking get stoned and go to the pictures. So that is something new. Something old. The Big Sleep I saw last night, a double feature at the Luna. We had a screening of Casablanca, a movie I've seen several times. Quite good if you haven't seen it. But I'll talk about The Big Sleep more because I found it very interesting to watch right after Casablanca, which is one of the greatest films of all time. Obviously, a Howard Hawks production like The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart, is also a heralded classic. But I wasn't the only person in the room that really felt the energy change when we got to the second feature. The Big Sleep's a lot faster than Casablanca, but ultimately didn't have that instant emotional, guttural reaction you get from Casablanca, but that's really an unfair comparison point. I will say, this movie has such quick dialogue, has such good Humphrey Bogart action in it. He's constantly flirting with women. They're constantly towing the line of what was acceptable to tease in that movie. And that's when the audience was really bubbling whenever there was some sexual innuendo on screen. And Humphrey's got such presence in this movie. Hot take. Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep has presence. But after watching, a real sad, emotional performance in Casablanca, seeing him get to just point a gun at people, and there's a lot of gun pointing in this movie, it was a whole lot of fun. It was pretty depressing watching it in the theater because everyone clapped for Casablanca and nobody made a noise at the end of The Big Sleep. I guess a lot of people took a big sleep of their own. But yeah, it's a snowball private detective classic directed by Howard Hawks with his usual humor, irreverence, and innuendos. It's fucking great. What do you want me to do? Shoot me? 3.5? Yeah, that's fine score. And now, for the namesake of the podcast, a little bit of Hemm Productions news. Honestly, this podcast is news enough for itself. Why am I starting this podcast now? When can we expect regular content? I'm looking for November to be a proper launch of the channel where I have more consistent uploads. I'm not trying to get famous on here, bro. This is just a portfolio. But I want consistency, and for the few fans who do tune in for every episode, I really appreciate you. And I just want people to know that I'm not slacking, and I want to remind myself that I'm not slacking. And so this podcast is a way for me to not only just flap my gums about movies for a bit, but it's also a great excuse to talk about what I'm doing, and then in a few months' time, I can look back and see how far I've come. So right now, I'm in the stages of planning a short horror film trilogy where a friend and I want to play around with more gore effects, more makeup effects, and honestly, more action. So I can give you 3 titles. The first is Dead Weight, the second is Kill Her, and the third is Kiko. So I'll let these titles rattle in your head a little bit. But they all have a connective tissue following relationships and toxic relationships and relationships to yourself, to your partner, how much is too much time with a partner, how much is too little, and what part of you starts to slip away when you're in a relationship or when you're focusing on your sexuality too much. All 3 projects have the same kind of feel. They've got the same actors and it'll be the same crew. So I think it will tie together as a nice little short film trilogy. And I do have feature ideas for each of them, but keeping things small for now, just like we're keeping this podcast nice and small. I'll lastly finish off by saying work on Seven Dizzer has recommenced, drawing new graphic novels each day for that. And obviously now I have this podcast to focus on and keep me motivated. So just to wrap up, today we talked about the Toronto Film Festival Awards. I found that article on Deadline, link in the description. For the Laika story, I was looking at IndieWire. Box Office Mojo is found at boxofficemojo.com, of course. And the something old was The Big Sleep, and something new was Honey Don't. Thanks for tuning into the Hemm Productions Podcast. Have a wonderful week.